During our formative years, we resided in a serene residential area, situated on the outskirts of a metropolis in Northern California. The choice of this location was motivated by the desire for a peaceful and secure lifestyle, away from the urban hustle and bustle. Although we were not deeply religious, our family adhered to some traditional spiritual practices, such as attending church every Sunday. We imagined that living surrounded by neighbors who shared strong moral principles would be beneficial. Indeed, most people were cordial, but there were some families, like the Harrisons, our next-door neighbors, that made us ponder. At first glance, they were the picture of amiability, but certain behaviors of theirs were peculiar and even alarming. Shortly after our move, we received an invitation to dinner with them. The conversation was pleasant, although the Harrison children seemed disconnected from contemporary cultural conventions, a consequence of not having a television at home. Despite this, their company was enjoyable. However, at an unexpected moment during dinner, one of the young men began to behave in an atypical manner, as if in an altered state of consciousness, articulating a sequence of disjointed words at a rapid pace. Concerned, my father did not hesitate to rise and inquire of Mr. Harrison about the young man's condition. The concern was evident in the boy's demeanor. However, instead of tending to his son, Mrs. Harrison displayed pride, and Mr. Harrison expressed divine gratitude, seeing the occurrence as a miracle. He explained to us that the son had the gift of speaking in tongues, a blessing they considered to be a direct intervention of the Holy Spirit. I was perplexed by the explanation, as it was a completely new experience for me. Shortly after we moved in, the Harrison family hosted us for dinner at their home. Despite the pleasant conversation, it was noticeable how difficult it was to connect with their children, who seemed disconnected from current cultural trends, since they did not have a television at home. However, they were undeniably kind. During dinner, an unusual event occurred. One of the young men began to behave strangely, as if in an altered state of consciousness, emitting a series of nonsensical words at an impressive speed. Concerned, my father promptly questioned Mr. Harrison about the boy's condition, whose distress was evident in his demeanor. However, instead of concern, an expression of pride appeared on Mrs. Harrison's face, while her husband expressed gratitude to the divine, regarding the episode as a miracle. He revealed to us that it was common for the young man to be touched by the ability to speak in different languages, considering it an intervention of the Holy Spirit. I was stunned by the situation, as it was completely outside my realm of experiences. During my childhood, we lived in a highly devout community in a tranquil town in Ohio. We moved there in search of a quieter and more protected daily life. Although religion was not the center of our lives, it was customary for us to attend Sunday services and the like. We imagined that living among neighbors of fervent faith would be beneficial. Indeed, most were extremely welcoming, although there were notable exceptions for their unusual and even alarming behaviors. Take, for example, the family next door. They presented themselves as friendly people and, in many ways, they truly were. However, at certain times, their behavior was at least strange and even alarming. It didn't take long after our arrival for them to pay us a cordial visit during dinner. Despite a promising start, we soon noticed a barrier in communication with the young people in that house, seemingly unaware of any pop culture references due to the absence of a television in their home. However, this did not prevent them from being pleasant. As is well known, the fun of jumping on a trampoline does not require knowledge of TV programs. But, at an unexpected moment during that meal, while conversations flowed and everyone enjoyed the lasagna made by my mother, one of the young men began to emit unusual sounds. His speech seemed like the prelude to some kind of crisis, with a gush of incomprehensible words that more resembled a long and accelerated sequence of sounds than coherent speech. My father, always ready to help, immediately got up and asked the father next door if his boy was all right. The expression on the little one's face was one of anguish, which left us all concerned. However, instead of checking on his son's well-being, the boy's mother expressed a proud smile and the father raised his hands to the heavens, chanting divine thanks for the supposed blessing. He revealed to us that occasionally the son was overtaken by the Holy Spirit and began to speak in tongues, communicating in the heavenly language of angels. The situation caused me great discomfort, as it was a scene completely beyond my understanding until then. The following day, upon waking up and heading to the bathroom for morning hygiene, strange sounds of moaning reached me through the partially open window. Carefully observing, I saw the patriarch of that family in his garden, in a scene that I assumed to be self-flagellation. He purportedly had a Bible in one hand and some kind of whip in the other, with which he struck himself on the back while declaiming biblical passages aloud. The blows were so intense that they caused cuts on his skin, from which blood flowed. Alarmed, I ran to inform my parents, who initially doubted what I was saying but soon became convinced upon witnessing it themselves. With delicacy, my father requested that the neighbor cease that act in our view, a request to which he complied, albeit hesitantly. After these episodes, the interaction became more distant, and invitations to common dinners ceased. Nevertheless, the courtesy of that family, despite their controversial practices, always left me perplexed. The head of that household, despite his actions suggesting otherwise, exhibited an extremely warm and welcoming personality. I wonder about the authenticity of this aspect in the intimacy of his home and whether the children, despite the appearance of normalcy, would not suffer future consequences for growing up amid such peculiarities. Years ago, Lisa and I decided to leave the urban chaos behind and settle in a quiet town in Illinois, aiming for serenity and a fresh start. We chose Springfield for its promise of peace, a value we cherished despite not strictly following religious practices. We imagined that living surrounded by neighbors with similar beliefs would be ideal. Indeed, we were well received by almost everyone, except for one family that would soon show us that not everything was as we expected. It didn't take long for us to be welcomed by the Thompsons, our neighbors, with a dinner invitation. The interaction was cordial, although their children seemed disconnected from our world, devoid of TV or familiarity with the pop culture we were accustomed to. Their hospitality was evident. However, the dinner took an unexpected turn when one of the boys began to exhibit unusual behavior, uttering disconnected sounds as if he were beside himself. My father, alarmed, confronted Mr. Thompson about the boy's state. The distress was palpable on the young man's face. But instead of concern, the Thompsons showed pride, interpreting it as a sign that the son was being touched by the gift of speaking in tongues, considered by them a divine blessing. That completely confused me, as it was an experience completely outside my range of experiences. The quest for peace guided us to what we believed to be our piece of suburban heaven. Springfield enchanted us with its tranquility, excellent schools, and numerous parks, turning it into a green oasis amidst the urbanization we came from. The proximity to the metropolis, just 30 minutes away, ensured that our move would not affect our careers. We thought we had found the perfect place to live. However, the reality that unfolded was very different from the dream. We lived on Maple Street and had a great relationship with the neighbors around us. On one side, a young family with whom we enjoyed barbecues on weekends. On the other side, lived a rather discreet elderly couple, who had the company of their grandson, a nurse dedicated to taking care of them and the house. His presence conveyed a sense of security, due to the attention and care he showed his grandparents. One afternoon, returning from work, I came across a distressing sight that contrasted with the serene daily life of our neighborhood. An animal, apparently hit by a vehicle, lay lifeless on the side of the street. The apathy of the driver, who didn't even bother to deal with the consequences, ignited in me a mixture of sadness and indignation. I decided to take responsibility for the remains of the unfortunate creature, hoping that its owner would show up looking for it. However, without any signs of a missing pet, I directed the body to the animal shelter, in an attempt to put the episode behind me. The calm was again broken when, one morning, I witnessed the grandson of our elderly neighbors bringing home a new feline, a thoughtful addition to brighten his grandparents' days. I found the gesture touching, but I couldn't help but warn him about the risks of allowing the animal to explore the outdoors, remembering the tragic accident before. He assured me that the cat would remain safe indoors. Everything seemed to be normalizing until, one morning, I was approached by a neighbor from the house next door with alarming news. Another cat had been found dead, now in his own garden, displaying clear signs of aggression. The unease was palpable, and together we decided to keep a close watch on any suspicious activity in the neighborhood. As the days passed, the atmosphere of apprehension intensified, with all the residents concerned about the possibility of the perpetrator of the deaths still being at large. The incident at the neighboring house reinforced our fears about the safety of the local pets. Feeling the need to act, I contacted the property owner to share my concerns about the well-being of the local pets. He seemed genuinely surprised by the reports, committing to stay vigilant and to report any strange behavior to the authorities. However, one night, the unexpected materialized in the form of police sirens echoing down the street. From the window, I witnessed the police taking action at the elderly couple's house, a scene I never imagined witnessing in our peaceful neighborhood. The authorities removed bags from the residence that, I presumed, carried evidence of something macabre. The next morning, the shocking truth came to light. The grandson, previously seen as a dedicated and loving young man, was implicated in a series of atrocities against the neighborhood cats. The community was shaken by the discovery. The young man we admired turned out to be responsible for acts of extreme cruelty. Disappointment and shock overwhelmed us, eroding the trust we had in community harmony. Faced with these events, Lisa and I concluded that it was time to reconsider our stay in Springfield. The desolation and distrust outweighed the peace we sought when we moved there. With regret, we prepared to leave, carrying the painful lesson that sometimes dangers reside much closer than we can imagine, hidden beneath the surface of apparent normality. Our ideal for a serene life in a hospitable community was overshadowed by the dark reality that evil can lurk in the shadows of the ordinary, forcing us to always be vigilant. During my time as a law student at a prestigious institution of higher education in the USA, I chose to settle in a shared property located in a serene area of an American metropolis. The choice for this location, especially in the final academic years, was largely motivated by the tranquil realization that only one of the adjacent apartments was occupied. Living in student residences, as is well known, often translates into noisy environments, full of nighttime surprises caused by colleagues who decide to extend club celebrations until dawn, accompanied by loud music. Such a scenario, evidently, does not contribute to maintaining a healthy sleep cycle, an element that I could not afford to neglect in the critical final year of my course. And so, with the valuable assistance of close friends, I dedicated a morning to transfer my belongings to the new home, hoping to establish a cordial bond with the neighbor upstairs, the only other soul who, from all indications, resided in the building. However, at one point, while I struggled to transport bags up the stairs, a figure caught my attention. There he was, observing me from his landing with a gaze devoid of warmth, expressionless. He was a man of remarkable stature, with a closely cropped blonde mane and eyes of such a light blue that they almost illuminated the environment with their penetrating coldness. It was as if his icy stares were capable of piercing the physical barrier separating us, imposing an atmosphere of unease with his mere presence. I greeted him with a friendly smile, but he did not respond to my greeting. Instead, he fixed his gaze on me for a brief moment and, without saying a word, slowly withdrew, leaving behind the echo of a door closing as he entered his apartment. My companion shot me a look of surprise and amusement as we whispered, hoping that our new neighbor would not turn out to be a bizarre figure. Looking back, that encounter left us with a strangely premonitory sensation. The first few nights passed quietly, bringing the tranquility I had longed for. This calm persisted until one night, while immersed in studies of international trade, unexpected noises from the hallway captured my attention. At first, I decided not to pay much attention, resorting to background music to maintain focus. However, the noises intensified as the hours passed, arousing my curiosity to the point where I could no longer ignore them. I got up and went to the door to investigate the source of the disturbance. What I heard was terrifying. Piercing screams of a woman echoed from the apartment above mine. Initially, I thought perhaps my neighbor was watching a suspense movie, justifying the disturbing sounds. But the more attentive I became, the more evident it became that the sound was repetitive, as if it were an audio file being played on loop. The idea that someone could spend hours on end listening to screams of agony paralyzed me with fear. For a moment, I considered the possibility of intervening and asking him to lower the volume, but the gravity of the situation and the fear of the unknown kept me immobile. The notion of someone immersed in the darkness of their apartment, absorbed by such sounds, was simply horrifying. It took a long time for silence to reign again. It was well past 1 a.m. when I finally felt able to try to sleep. Lying in bed, immersed in the darkness of my room, a flood of questions invaded my thoughts. How could someone spend hours listening to something so disturbing? And what if, in fact, what echoed through the floor above mine was something even more sinister, such as scenes of extreme violence or banned films? The restlessness kept me awake for what seemed like an eternity, trapped in a situation from which I saw no easy way out, especially after investing a significant amount in fees and the first month's rent. Surrounded by these concerns, I eventually fell asleep, exhausted. The next day, I looked visibly shaken, so much so that my friends questioned if everything was okay, noticing my tired appearance. I tried to reassure them, but confessed that something very strange was happening in the apartment above mine. They tried to comfort me with stories about their own peculiar neighbors, suggesting that, after all, at least I wasn't dealing with an intrusive person. Somehow, they were right, but it did not diminish my frustration with my neighbor's lack of consideration. Determined, I put on a resolute expression and went up to his apartment, prepared to ask him to lower the volume. As I knocked on his door forcefully, I waited for a response. I had faced noisy neighbors before, and usually a simple tap on the door was enough to calm things down. But this time, the noise persisted. The sound coming from inside was so real and scary that I can barely describe it. It sounded like someone's genuine terror in their last moments. As the door began to open, fear took hold of me. The The strange blond man I had observed days before now wore a mask. Not a common mask, but a varnished wooden piece reminiscent of funeral masks, those made as a final tribute to a deceased person. However, there was something deeply wrong with it. The mask was distorted, with indecipherable symbols engraved on it, conveying an undeniable sense of unease. However, what shocked me the most was not the mask. As he opened the door, he was completely naked, a sight that instinctively made me take a few steps back, creating a safe distance between us. With all the politeness I could muster at that moment, I asked if he could lower the volume of the music. He remained still, making no sound or gesture, just staring at me intently through the openings in the mask. I gradually backed away, apologizing for having bothered him, hoping that my conciliatory attitude would persuade him to heed my request. However, he remained still, silent, keeping his gaze fixed on me. Upon noticing scars marking his chest, panic took hold of me, and I ran back to my apartment, locking the door hastily as I called a friend who lived nearby, seeking refuge for a while. My friend, realizing my distressed state and curious about the reason for my sudden aversion to the apartment that had previously pleased me, offered shelter without hesitation, telling me to stay for as long as I needed. Faced with this disturbing experience, I decided to file a complaint for indecent exposure at the local police station. However, the officer informed me that, in the absence of witnesses, the case would boil down to my word against his, making it difficult to build a formal accusation. The recommendation was to keep a distance from the problematic neighbor, even if it meant giving up the apartment. Without delay, I organized my move, relying on friends' help during the day to avoid unwanted encounters. And, as expected, the mysterious neighbor appeared once again, his silent presence on the stairs reinforcing the decision to leave. This episode made me understand why the other apartments remained vacant. After completing my law degree with distinction, I devoted myself to a legal career in an American metropolis. Despite the memories of that time in the city, I prefer not to dwell on the moments lived in that desolate apartment building. A few years ago, upon returning from work, I found my girlfriend, Sarah, displaying a desolate expression while sitting on the couch. Upon inquiring about her state, she uttered the words no one wishes to hear, "We need to talk." With sorrow, she revealed her dissatisfaction with the course of our relationship, proposing a break so that we could explore new relationships with other people to determine if we were truly the right match for each other. Despite my heart opposing the idea, the love I felt for her led me to comply with her wish, nurturing the hope that this step could somehow reignite our union. However, after a few weeks, it became evident that our bond was definitively broken, forcing me to leave the apartment we shared, as she was the rightful owner. Faced with the pressure to find a new home, my search was rushed and ended up being less thorough than it should have been, culminating in regret. I opted for a studio in a building with a gloomy appearance, more reminiscent of a setting from a suspense movie, but it was affordable, immediately available, and required only a month's rent in advance as a guarantee. Returning to my parents' house was not a desirable option for me, despite their willingness to take me in, as I felt that it would represent a personal setback. So, I decided on the studio. The move went smoothly, given my limited collection of belongings. I chose not to engage in property disputes with Sarah, preferring to avoid escalating existing tensions over material disagreements. As long as I kept my video game console and the 4K TV, I considered myself content. The day after my move-in, I decided to greet the resident of the apartment across from mine, motivated by the loud music indicating his presence. However, The reception was anything but warm. The young man who answered, with a thick beard and an indecipherable accent, barely cracked open the door. I introduced myself and made myself available for any eventuality, receiving only a cold stare in return. I imagined that I might have interrupted some crucial moment, so I quickly apologized and withdrew, after the stranger hastily introduced himself as Jack. There was something in his voice that suggested that this was not his real name, but I chose not to entertain unfounded suspicions, considering the possibility that he was simply a man of few words. Sometime later, I encountered an unfamiliar individual coming out of the same apartment. When I greeted him and tried to initiate a dialogue, questioning if he had any connection to Jack, the scent of alcohol on his breath was unmistakable, and when I asked him again while pointing to Jack's door, he also asserted himself as Jack Smite. This inconsistent confession raised an alarm in my mind that something very irregular was happening in that place. The routine of enigmatic visitors continued, leading me to mention the matter to the landlord during a conversation about who truly inhabited the neighboring apartment. He informed me that the tenant's name was Stephen, praising him as exemplary. I was on the verge of revealing the peculiar episodes, but decided that perhaps I should not get involved. The situation took a dramatic turn when, one night, I was awakened by disturbances in the hallway, which soon revealed themselves to be the police conducting an intense search for suspects of a heinous crime in Stephen's apartment. The shock was immense upon discovering that the police had rescued a young woman in a deplorable state, evidencing a serious case of human trafficking right next to where I lived. The discovery that individuals with whom I had maintained a cordial relationship were involved in nefarious activities was a devastating blow. Faced with this revelation, I had no choice but to return to my parents' home, haunted by the reality that evil resided so close, hidden behind deceptive facades. Hello, everyone. I sincerely hope you enjoyed today's video, finding it enjoyable and engaging. If you like the content and are eager to explore more similar materials, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the like button. Your support plays a crucial role in our ability to continue producing content and means a lot to us. I'm also looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the video, so please don't hesitate to leave your feedback in the comments section below. Your contribution is essential in helping us tailor our content to your preferences. Until we meet again, please take care and stay safe. And always remember, it's a great joy and an absolute privilege to share these moments with all of you.